Kalamazoo, we are back. Moore TV for a little bit of table talk with Commissioner Stephanie Moore. I am so glad to be on live today with my really good friend, Matt Lechel. He has done a lot of work in this community, literally blazing the trails, making sure that we have safe access roadways, not for motorized vehicles, but non-motorized. We're gonna have a really great conversation tonight and enlighten this community, and hopefully we can get you to be more active on issues that can create better quality of life for everybody. Matt, I know you very well. I know your history and what you've done, being a family man and just being an overall good citizen. But take a minute to introduce yourself to the community.
Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate it. This is quite an honor to get to be on your TV show, and I really relish the opportunity to connect with you and share a little bit. As you mentioned, I've been working and volunteering in the Kalamazoo community for a little over 10 years. What I do professionally is work for Kalamazoo Public Library, running a program called One Place, which is a nonprofit capacity building center. And I'm happy to talk about that. But I think the main thing that we want to talk about today is volunteer work that I do around the topic of safe streets. And when I say safe streets, what I really mean is a vision where anyone ages 8 to 80 can get where they need to go using any form of transportation that works for them. So that includes a great bus system, sidewalks that are connected and accessible and cleared, bike lanes, protected bike lanes where kids and seniors could feel safe, and cars too, right? Like, we're not trying to start a war on cars here. That's part of a solution as well. But, kind of the last few years in Kalamazoo, part of what myself and actually many of others have tried to just bring to the table is, with a small shift in the millions of dollars in transportation funding that comes to our local community, we could actually improve public safety outcomes, public health outcomes, quality of life. At its core, for me, this is about kids being able to walk safely to school, to elementary schools in our neighborhoods. So that's sort of a little brief intro of kind of what some of that advocacy work has involved.
Absolutely. A lot of times I'm talking about safe and beautiful neighborhoods, but we really need to talk about healthy neighborhoods and how we get to that, having access and opportunity to be able to move around in convenience in the way that a person prefers. So let's just talk a little bit. I love your background with the bike and the trail back there. So let's just talk a little bit about access and wanting to be mobile, and what does that mean for most people in the community?
Good question. Yeah, there's a long answer to that, and I'm really happy to dive into it. I think I want to start by sharing an anecdote of something I came across recently. But before I do that, I will just own that, my thinking on this continues to evolve. I'm learning alongside all of us. When I started doing advocacy around this, it was mostly like, I want bike lanes. I like to ride my bike. I want protected bike lanes, so myself, my family, people I know that get to work safely. And my advocacy almost exclusively at times was, we need to build these bike lanes, period. And I want to own, just how privileged that was, and out of touch in a lot of ways. And it isn't that bike lanes are bad. We still do need bike lanes. Yeah. But I had this sort of singular view that, I needed to have a better perspective on. And that really came from my privilege, right? And it's some stuff I had to work through. A great book I read is called Bicycle/Race, Transportation, Culture, and Resistance. It kind of changed my thinking, not to say bike lanes are bad, but to say this is really, at its core, needs to be centered in access to the most marginalized in our community. And actually, if we look at the data, the people who are walking and biking disproportionately, it is the marginalized folks in our community. Now, those might not be the people who you see get interviewed on the paper, talking about bikes and what they want for bikes. But actually, they are the folks who are most consistently biking around our community, and we need to center those folks. They know best in this work. And I tell that sort of intro just to say I had a great interaction with Gwendolyn Hooker recently, who I know you know.
Yeah.
Gwendolyn, again, informed me with my sort of naive and privileged perspective of a need that's been going on for a long time in the community, which is people, whether they're coming home from being incarcerated, coming home from substance abuse treatment or several other things have to rely on bike to get to work oftentimes, and they have issues getting access to bikes. And someone like Gwendolyn for years, and you, I'm sure as well, have been literally like fulfilling that need, even though it isn't necessarily the explicit mission of her organization. She's like, I get how important this is. Y'all need a bike to get to work. Even when the buses were running full time, there's still gaps in that system. Now, we're greatly reduced in that capacity. People need bikes. So, she's telling me like, we knew Rep. Hoadley's office, Community Service Charities, was good for 1 or 2 a year as they had the resources. And we knew that, so-and-so, this network over here was able to get 1 or 2 bikes. And the more I just like reflect on that situation that Gwendolyn shared with me and the leadership that she's shown over the years, one, it's like, believe Black women, empower folks like Gwendolyn, like forget this bureaucracy, like get her the money. She's been solving this problem for many years, when many of us, myself included, were sort of oblivious to it. So I just wanted to lift that up and share that anecdote a little bit, that like there is a need for people to get bikes to get to work right now in Kalamazoo. The most marginalized folks in the community, there are people like Gwendolyn, like you, who are creating access, getting them bikes to get transportation, to get to work. And that's like one small sliver of, the issue, but it's a really important one, and one I just learned about, which wasn't me, but I was really grateful to learn about that and just lift up what's happening. And, Ministry of Communities providing bikes to folks as well. One thing I thought was really fascinating that they shared is it was an idea from their member, right? Mm-hmm. A member said, hey, a lot of us use bikes. This would be really helpful if we could get a system to get them to folks. So anyhow, that was a long answer, Camille.
It was a wonderful answer. And let me just acknowledge Gwendolyn Hooker as well, too. She is phenomenal and do great work in this community. I remember I have a loved one, my uncle, who worked at a restaurant way out in Portage. We lived on the north end of town, and he would have to ride his bike every day, rain, snow, or shine, to get to work for a third shift job. And, like you mentioned, the bus system wasn't available during the time that he needed to be there for his shift. So it's really important that we are allowing people mobility so that they can do the day-to-day things that they need to do to take care of their family. But let's talk a little bit too, because of course we need it. We do recreation. We use it for work and to handle our responsibilities. But there also needs to be this conversation around safety, that when bikes are on the roadway, when people are traveling to and fro, that, the folks that are in vehicles be mindful of this traffic and be courteous and kind to bikers so that they are safe.
Absolutely. I mean, people driving 2,000-pound, 350 horsepower vehicles that are licensed and insured and are very much deadly weapons have a great responsibility. And I think in our society, we've maybe lost that a little bit. Particularly, we see 37,000 deaths a year, give or take a few, every year from automobile violence, which I would include car crashes, cars hitting bike riders, cars hitting pedestrians, cars hitting Amish, buggies, you name it. We should consider those 37,000 deaths a year as preventable public safety and health crisis. And towns that really are digging into this stuff are saying these 37,000 deaths a year don't have to happen. This is actually preventable. I would lift up a huge part of it is design, right? I mean, through my neighborhood, for example, I live essentially at the corner of Woodward and North. I know we're sort of neighbors, I think, down the road anyhow.
Yeah.
By the way, a pretty significant automobile violence just happened on the corner of Stewart and North, where a KPS student was hit by a car driver after he got off the bus, a 15-year-old. This happened a few weeks ago. But actually to the south of where I live, M43 bisects the Stewart neighborhood as a 3-lane one-way. In some ways, I don't even blame drivers. Like a 3-lane one-way, there's only one thing that promotes, which is like to go as fast as possible. And I'm not saying drivers shouldn't obey the speed limit, but we do need to think about design. Like the reality is towns that have figured this out have said, we need to implement a design where people just can't drive super fast. Like 25 is what will feel fast. And by the way, I also think it's really important to lift up that enforcement in a lot of situations is not the answer, because we know that it's going to have disproportionate impact, particularly on communities of color, Black communities. You know, we have the data. We know that is the case. They're not saying there isn't a place for enforcement or it can't be done properly, but we can't just say, you know, slow down the cars with police enforcement, because we know exactly what that means and the consequences that will come with that. But there are things that we can do, and design is a really good option. And I hope that, you know, we as a community can start thinking about that in this way. Like, we could slow down the cars on M43 virtually overnight if we wanted to, by design. It would create better quality of life in the neighborhood. It would increase public health outcomes, and just many other things.
I totally agree with you, especially with that 3-lane street, which is in the heart of a residential area where families with children live and people are going to and from, and not even just young children, but we have college age students in that particular area as well. So let's, you know, you mentioned the design. I know that the city has had meetings talking about, you know, the design. What do you vision for that area in terms of having a better design that's more accessible and safe for people in our community?
I joke, you know, give me like 10 bales of hay and I'll redesign the street myself overnight.
And you could do it. I know you could do it.
I mean, actually, though, that isn't that, you know, wild of a thing. I'm sort of half joking. I'm sure I'll get a knock on my door if I redesign Kalamazoo Ave overnight with hay bales. But the towns, you know, as we look at who's done this, because we don't have to like just say like we're going to create a whole brand new thing. There's actually cities all over the world that have started to dig into this stuff. And one thing I want to lift up is the inherent knowledge and power of communities and neighbors where they live, and those neighborhoods know best. So what we might be able to say to a neighborhood is not like, should we build a bike lane or not, but hey, we're going to create a safe transportation network for people biking, walking, and driving. We need your help and expertise how to implement that well in this town. Because, you know, we don't ask people if they want us to build a road for cars, right? There's no charrette about how we're going to build our car infrastructure. That just happens. And I do think to some degree, like, we got to get going. Kalamazoo is actually pretty far behind on this stuff. That is, it comes from a critical perspective, I know, but it's also actually true. And statistically true. We're one of the top cities in the state in terms of automobile violence against pedestrians, people walking. There's lots of reasons for that. But we got to get moving. And so in part, it's like, recognize the inherent knowledge of neighborhoods and let's get to work. Like, let's start trying stuff. We're going to charrette ourselves to death a little bit here. And the charrettes have actually been really good and are empowering and positive and engaging in some ways. But like, we got to start doing it. You know, there's folks I talked to, a number of folks who live on the neighborhood, just to the west of Douglas there. I guess maybe it's called West Douglas or something like that. A lot of families and a bunch of folks I know, you know, as well. And they're talking about this. So they're like, cars cut through our neighborhood going super fast. We all drive too. This isn't anti-car, but like, are there things we could do to slow down the car drivers? You know, maybe a speed bump or maybe some creative art on the road, or there's actually tons of things we could do. But we got to get to work. Kalamazoo has a real issue with acting. You know, I watched as we sort of took a decade to build the 1 mile connector downtown, and it's better than what we had. We can't like wait a decade to do $1 million project. We need to get to work right now. So let's let the neighbors in the Stewart neighborhood choose a couple streets to pedestrianize. Let's let the neighbors in the North Side neighborhood choose streets that are important to them and impact and change them in ways that work for them. And let's get to work now, because there's a ton to be done. That's sort of one thing in this issue is like, we have some control over this. There's a lot we don't control right now, but in terms of transportation, we have a ton of control locally.
Right.
And streets are something that every single one of us is impacted by, right? Like, literally all of us live on a street. We interact with them every single day. They're like more than 25% of our city. This is low-hanging fruit. Like, we can do a ton of work right now. So that isn't a specific idea. It's more like a call to action. And
I was just about to say that is a very powerful call to action. And so, getting people to come forth and be a part of this whole movement, right? Being these advocates or activists to make sure that we have a good design, that it's something that has input overall from the residents in the community. Matt, are you a part of a group, or even if it's just within the Stewart neighborhood, of some folks that you are intentionally focusing on this work that other people could be a part of?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, that has happened in fits and starts in this community. There was a 501c3 called Complete Streets Coalition. It's sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit. There are certainly groups, who are doing this work right now that I'll lift up. One is Open Roads in terms of youth biking. They're doing really great work. I know, their work. Folks like Gwendolyn, Hope Through Navigation, doing super awesome work on this. Ministry of Community, providing free bikes to people. We need to do more. We need to create some structures in more formal ways to engage here in Kalamazoo, particularly as we allow neighborhoods to kind of get to work here. I've had some resistance in Stewart. I won't lie. I'll be totally honest with you. I love the Stewart neighborhood and where I live. But a couple of the shrets I've gone to, like a previous director said things like, no one bikes in this neighborhood. Well,
that's not true.
3 little boys who live on North Street who I watch ride their bikes every single day.
My grandsons live on Jefferson and they bike all the time.
I see people biking, strolling, walking around this neighborhood, all the time. But it's tough. Biking is not a monolith and walking is not a monolith. There's actually, as we're discussing, many different needs and things intersecting. So we have some work to do in that area, but I'm excited to do that. Much like we're having this dialogue and have over the last couple of years, I've appreciated you engaging me several times, and I've been very passionate and kind of worked up a little bit. This is what we got to keep doing, finding people who agree, finding people who live near us, and kind of building and organizing.
But that's one of the reasons why I really like having this forum, right? Because we can talk about issues that are extremely important, but not necessarily the messages that we receive that we should, so that we can be empowered with information and to be able to act. We talked a little bit about the streets, but one of the things that Kalamazoo is known for are our trails. We have some really wonderful trails that are accessible, bikeable, walkable. What's your thoughts on that?
I love our trail system. I'm incredibly passionate about it. I'm a critical lover of it, so I have some critiques as well, but that's one of the things I fell in love with about Kalamazoo. Where I live, Woodward and North, I'm about 100 yards from a trail. If I go north on North Street, I can take that trail all the way to Lake Michigan. I can take that trail to downtown Kalamazoo. I also think trails to me are like this really accessible point for folks. I talk to a lot of people who say, I would bike if it was safe, but like, I'm not going to ride my bike out on these busy roads. Like, are you kidding me? That's so scary. And I get it. We know, though, we can look at lots of other towns, like where there's safe infrastructure, where people feel separated from cars, a lot more people will decide that this is an option for them. And that's one reason why I love trails. It's like trails are accessible to anyone. The trail that cuts through the Stewart neighborhood and the north side, right where I live, we use almost every day as a family. I see people from all stripes of life on that trail every single day for transportation, for recreation, you name it. So just like this really versatile asset that I think we should have more of. I could imagine a trail spur that goes to every neighborhood. We still need a north-south connection of a non-motorized trail here in Kalamazoo. There's a ton we could do, particularly I think when we get political leadership that says, this is really important, this is going to happen, and sort of pushes us there. And I've appreciated your advocacy. And by the way, I thank you for all your questions. One thing I don't want to finish with before we get a chance to talk about today is just something that you're doing that I'm really grateful for, which is running for state representative.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, Commish, that's what we need is elected officials, particularly at the state level where a lot of the funding is, to not just go there and sort of, play the political game, but fight for Kalamazoo. And that's why when you said you were running, I was excited to endorse you immediately, because it's like, we need a fighter. Kalamazoo is a super progressive town. We have a ton of social capital we're sending our rep to Lansing with. and they need to fight for us. And I'm 100% sure you're going to do that. And I'm just really grateful that
Well, thank you. And you know, I think one thing that's really important is that you have somebody that listens to the community and has those relationships and understands that when a community doesn't have what it needs, this is the impact that we have. And so when you're at the table penning policy or supporting legislation to go through, you understand that you will not create more barriers if you know and understand the system, the community, the players, and also hear the voices of the people. So I'm so glad to have rich relationships like the one that I have with you, Matt, and thank you for your support. I appreciate that. You know, I do want to talk a little bit about inspiring people to bike, to walk, to use the trails. What would you say to someone who may not had a chance to experience you know, biking throughout our community because maybe they have some type of fear or apprehension, or they just have not thought about it yet?
Awesome question. That's something I think about a lot, and I want to keep thinking about it and figure out what's going to be successful in that area, because that is the goal, right? Like, I want a Kalamazoo community where anyone who wants to feel safe getting on a bike or walking to where they need to go. Part of it is meeting people where they're at. I think a big part of it is creating safe infrastructure. If people feel safe, they're going to ride. If you build it, they will come. There's a ton of data showing that. And we have one in Kalamazoo, right? Like the Kalamazoo River Valley Trail, for example, that cuts through the Stewart neighborhood in the north side. We have the data, like hundreds of thousands of people are using that every day because it's a safe piece of non-motorized infrastructure. So we need a lot more of that. You know, personally, I'll lift up, like, I have a short bike ride from where I work downtown at the library to my house. It's a little over a mile. I wouldn't change that 15-minute commute for anything. And it's easy to do year round. I don't have fancy gear. I don't have a fancy bike. You know, I'm not necessarily a rider for exercise. It's actually more of a transportation thing for me, but it is exhilarating, especially after a hard day at the office. It's a good way to sort of clear your mind. And it is a healthy, sustainable form of transportation as well. The last thing I would just mention is something that a lot of us don't consider, myself included, because this isn't like a lifelong thing for me. I really only started to get into more active transport a couple years ago. And living in Kalamazoo is what really helped with that. But cost and affordability, you know, the average American spends $10,000 a year on their car. Now, a lot of folks might be able to get away with spending less, but it's still going to be a very significant amount of money. And I know I don't have to tell anyone that, right? Gas, insurance, maintenance, new tires, etc., parking, boom, boom.
Yeah.
A bike costs a few $100. You don't have to fill it up. You don't need insurance. You can get a $20 lock and keep it safe. And
a helmet.
And a helmet. So very little barrier to entry. You know, there still is some, you know, but you can usually get a solid bike for $100 even, compared to a car, which is probably going to be 10 times that, you know, for an entry point. So affordable.
You know, I'm proud to say that I just actually purchased a bike about a month ago, and my best friends and I, we ride at least every other day, and we do it for exercise, but it's really good because you get a chance to be in the community, you get to see people, but you said it earlier, love where you live and just be able to embrace that sense of community. I wanted to mention that, you know, 2 points, because you talked about government a little bit. In Kalamazoo, even if you're a bus rider, you can even put your bike on the bus. There's places that you can go as a bike rider that has, you know, bike stands and everything now. There's places where you can, you know, connect your bike and leave it in a safe place. You know, we've talked about design. I think that shows that the advocacy, especially a lot of the work that you have done over the years, that if we speak up, that the local government folks, they listen, and then they begin to enact these things that give us greater access and opportunity.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's been a huge group of people fighting for decades for safer human infrastructure of our streets in Kalamazoo. When I was an undergrad student at Western, I remember reading a proposal that an undergrad had made a decade prior, in the early 90s, for a safe greenway non-motorized connection from campus to downtown. We're still waiting on that. You know, 40 years later, I'm hopeful that we're going to get folks to act on that. But it is working. there's a great book also on this topic I recommend called Street Fight, and it's from a city planner in New York, and she names it Street Fight because she sort of says, like, this is going to be a fight. Like, this system has a lot of inertia, so we're going to have to, you know, advocate strongly for what we need. And that's sort of why I brought up, I'm stoked that you're running. Like, we're going to need a fight for all these things. Complete Streets, this thing I'm passionate about, is obviously just one of a bunch of incredibly, you know, important issues that are going to require a fight. And it intersects with a lot of those issues as well.
I think that, and you talked about even, you know, loving the community and access and everything and being somewhat critical. I think we all have some criticism in different ways. I think one of the things I would like to see happen in the very near future is that homeowners and businesses do better with clearing the sidewalks. With clearing, you know, that access so that people can. And even the city of Kalamazoo, when we have snow and adverse weather, understanding that everybody needs to be mobile to get to where they need to get to. And so having that, doing this a little bit better job of making it accessible for people to get from point A to point B.
I totally agree. Particularly, you know, the part of that I'm in complete alignment on is this is about accessibility. This is, you know, if we think about this big picture, what we want to do is create a multiracial coalition for mobility justice. I think that's in front of us. And that's a term from that book, Bicycle/Race, that I mentioned. Dr. Antonio Lugo coined it. We can do that here. That's the work that we need to do moving forward. There's a lot of work still to do. It is about accessibility. One thing I would just bring up about the sidewalks specifically, you know, we've actually been getting the city to think about it more as a systemic issue than just an individualized issue. Because the reality is, even if we get 90% of the homeowners and businesses to comply, which would be a miracle, that 10% still creates a lack of access. And so what we're seeing some cities do, including Buffalo, New York, a couple cities around Michigan even, is the city themselves are saying, look, we're all in this together. We're going to choose one main sidewalk in every neighborhood, and we're going to do that ourselves to show you that we're a part of this too. So city crews are going to come out. By the way, much like we do for car drivers and roadways, where we tell them we're working around the clock. We have a team of highly skilled unionized employees, all hands on deck resources, not every person for themselves. Like, we're doing this for you. What if we took a small portion of that expertise of city snow removal and applied it to the sidewalks? I think that would be a good step in the right direction to ensure, one, at a minimum, every neighborhood had at least one network that was totally accessible. We could guarantee it. But then, as you said, hopefully show everyone else, like, we need your help too. So business owners, homeowners, you know, the city's providing this model. It's up to us to clear these other streets that they aren't able to get to.
Absolutely. So sound like you're talking about equity and accessibility and mobility. So shout out to all the city workers that are doing a good job, but this is some really good information that can help us push a little bit further. So before I transition, because I do want to talk about one place, if that's okay with you, I want you to just share some thoughts that if I didn't ask the right question, is some things you want to talk about in terms of accessibility and mobility.
I think I said what I wanted to. I really appreciate this opportunity. I do have a couple of super quick questions for you, if that's okay. When is the election that you're running in? I apologize that I don't know. It's August, I believe.
August 4th, Tuesday, August 4th, the first Tuesday in August.
So that's,
and you know that this is going to be a vote by mail election. So citizens should look for their application in the mail. They have to complete that application and return it to their local clerks in order to receive their ballot.
and so on Tuesday, August 4th, there is the Democratic primary for state representative. And some folks might not know, I know I was ignorant to this for a while until I learned that in Kalamazoo, because we're so progressive, almost without exception, the person that wins that primary is going to be the very heavy favorite to get that seat. So August 4th is really what matters here, right?
Absolutely. That's the do or die.
August
This is a Democrat body in there.
Awesome. And the other thing I just wanted to quick ask is, I know that I've heard you lift up some folks that are running for county commission, and I am not super well informed right now, and I'm wondering if you can just quickly lift up a couple names for me, and I'll share this out to my friends as well. So who's running for county commission that we should make sure to keep our eyes on?
Oh my God. I love Jen Strebs. She's a current township trustee. She's running for a county commission, and I believe that's District 4. There is a young woman, Veronica McKissick. She is a state employee, a social worker, a WMU grad, and she's running in District 5, I believe. Let me see, Tammy Ray, who I think you know. She is running for my seat for District 1. And let's see, who else we got going on? Tracy Hall is running for re-election, our current vice chair of the Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners, my favored commissioner. There's a young woman, Montice Morales. She works for the Kalamazoo Promise at KVCC, and she is running for county commission as well. And in that seat already is my very, very good friend, Zach Bauer. He was appointed to that seat, to the county commission. And I want to be, clear that since Zach has been on this county commission board, I can get some work done. I can breathe. I have some support. Tracy Hall and I both. And so he's been more than amazing to work with. So that's going to be a very interesting race over there in District 2 with Montice, who is a Black Latino woman who's very, very, very qualified. And then you also have Zach Bauer, who is really, really doing a wonderful job. And yeah, so what is that? I can't remember the district, but Keisha Dickerson is running out in Texas Township. That's about all I got for county commission.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a very good election. We've seen the most diversity and inclusion, regardless if it's race or gender. We see more progressives that are stepping up to run for office, people that are definitely friendly to the conversation that we've been had today about accessibility and mobility and equity. And I think Kalamazoo is poised to some real change that's going to really uplift our entire community. I'm anxious. I'm looking forward to it. But we got to work. We got a lot of work to do. And that's why we got to make sure the accessibility is there, because we're going to be out there walking and knocking doors and all kinds of stuff. So just to remind people, make sure you're registered to vote and make sure that you get your voter absentee ballot application in the mail. So, I also wanted to just touch on just a little bit, Matt, about the work that you're doing through One Place, because the truth is you talked a lot about some organizations, from Hope Through Navigation to Ministry with Community to the Bicycle Group, who are nonprofit organizations that rely on the supports and the resources that are available at One Place. Talk a little bit about your role and some of the things that you do at One Place.
Sure. Thanks. I'm happy to do that. So One Place is what I do professionally. One Place is a program of Kalamazoo Public Library, and it's a capacity building center for nonprofits in Kalamazoo County. What capacity building looks like for us is a series of free public workshops, now webinars, because we're not doing in-person programming currently. We do board trainings. We have an employment opportunities page. It's really the go-to spot for nonprofit jobs in Kalamazoo County. Right now, even amidst all this going on, we have 54 jobs posted. We have a Leader Academy. It's a 10-month intensive program that focuses on emerging nonprofit leaders. So we're really in the leadership development business. But anyone who works for a nonprofit, volunteers with a nonprofit, serves on a board is welcome to come. And one really cool thing is, because of an ongoing collaboration between the Public Library, the Community Foundation, and the Irving S. Gilmore Foundation, 100% of One Place services are free to anyone in the community. So if any of our webinars, our trainings, any of our services resonate with folks, they're welcome to sign up. The website is kpl.gov/oneplace. We also do something called technical assistance. So essentially we would do a free consulting session with you. We have a consultant and trainers directory. So if you're looking to hire someone who's really an expert on a specific area within the sector, we can connect you with those folks as well. So that's just a brief snapshot, but I mentioned we have a website. You can check that out for more information. We have a lot going on. Just as a quick example, this week we'll do workshops on anti-racism organizing with E-Race.
Mm-hmm.
Do workshops on fundraising and crisis. July, we'll see us do workshops on grant writing. Those are always really popular with the community, and that's just a small snapshot of some of our offerings.
So these workshops that are coming up, they're going to be online?
The ones I just mentioned are online. Yeah, kpl.gov/oneplace. You can register for our events there.
Well, let's talk just a tad bit about the coronavirus and its impact on your work in the organization. What have you seen or experienced?
Good question. To quickly just go back to the topic we were talking about before, one fascinating thing that's happened in terms of the Complete Streets movement is cities around the world are shutting down a lot of their urban core to car traffic because it just is overbuilt and unnecessary. And this is happening all around Michigan, all around the country, all across the world. And so they're not banning cars, but they're just saying, hey, we need a little bit more extra room for dining. We need extra space for people to be walking and biking safely. And that's really exciting. I hope that we'll see Kalamazoo jump on that trend as well. I think a real challenge is to do that in an equitable way. So that is something that we're going to really have to think about and organize around. In terms of One Place, I would say what we're seeing, one is an increased demand for our services. This has been an incredible crisis for everyone, and the nonprofit sector is not immune to that. In fact, one challenge the nonprofit sector has that's a little bit unique right now is whereas businesses maybe are hurting from a lack of demand, right? You can't go to a restaurant or a bar right now. Nonprofits, at least some, have the opposite problem where demand is way up for their services. We think about like food banks and other orgs like that, Ministry with Community, and many, many others actually. So they're facing this situation where like resources are super constrained, their business models have been upended, and demand for their services is going up. And that's a tough time. I mean, nonprofit leaders are really doing a great job, one, but struggling. And I'm anxious for the months and years ahead because it's probably going to be a tough economic haul, not to even mention the health impacts of this devastating crisis. So I just want to be real about that. This is really tough on nonprofits. What I would just say, we're noticing in terms of programming is one thing is people really wanting to hear from trusted, authentic leaders. So this isn't the time, I think if you're like, aren't really well known to all of a sudden become really well known. I mean, maybe it is if you're really good at it, but a thing we're seeing is like leaders who are known in the community and who people trusted and respected prior. When we offer something that they're doing, it's like a ton of people are coming to sign up. And I think in part, what we're seeing is folks just want, to hear from leaders that they know and trust and believe in. And that's been an interesting trend that we've been observing just in terms of what we're doing. What about you? What have you been seeing?
So the same, we see that where there's been need in the community, especially for the most vulnerable people, that need has been exacerbated. So making sure that people have access to housing and food security, making sure that they have access to resources to pay their bills, to sustain. And now you have all these families, these parents that are trying to shift to almost being homeschool teachers now. And so I have a freshman in high school, and it's been a challenge of, working with him to make sure that he gets his stuff done online so that he can, preserve his credits and be able to move forward to the next level in school. We have this dynamic even with seniors and all graduates not being able to truly experience the graduation situation. And then you look at our most senior or seasoned members of our community who have been shut in, who need to be checked on. They need to have access to food and even mobility to do the things that they need to access their prescriptions and things of that nature. And so I've been able to help folks connect. Either if it's calling 211 or 311 or asking the churches and other people to connect with people in the community so we don't leave anyone behind, that we don't look up and we haven't heard from someone in 10 days and they've been hurt, harmed, or worse. And so it's really also grown us in a way to be more loving and kind and to communicate more, because now we got to check in and we got to check on folks. And so it's been very scary dealing with this pandemic, but I think that it has really brought the strength of Kalamazoo out even more to show that we stand together when tragedy happens. We are very resourceful. We just got to do better at connecting those resources and then really empowering people to know their options. If this isn't the time to drive, you can bike and be safe. You know what I'm saying? If you want to go here and now you gotta, as you're transitioning your organization and your business, there's so many different resources. So I think it's really been a great educational moment, for all of us to be innovative and think out of the box and tap into the trusted voices that you talked about and those resources so that we can figure out what's next. I don't think that we're going to ever go back totally to what, we're in the midst now of creating a new normal.
Agreed. Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I like to ask my guests to do some inspiration. We talked about this pandemic, the challenges and even the opportunities, but just give people some words of encouragement of, how we gonna make it, and I want to encourage you to do so.
Cool, thanks. The first thing I would say is vote for Commissioner Moore August 4th, 2020. That's super important to me in our community. That's an inspiring message, and I appreciate you running. I give ultimate props to anyone who throws their hat in the ring to run for public office. You're a tremendous and courageous leader, even before you decided to do that, but especially now. So thank you. August 4th, Stephanie Moore,
Yes.
Everyone vote. What I'll leave folks with is find the thing that works for you. If that's a 2-minute walk down, your sidewalk around your house, cool. If that is a 15-minute walk with your baby pushed in a stroller on the Kalamazoo River Valley Trail through your neighborhood, awesome. If that's getting on a bike and riding with your girlfriends, perfect. If that is, trying out a tricycle because that's what you think works for you, awesome. But try something. This is a really good opportunity. Bike sales are actually spiking worldwide. Folks like you, I think, are saying, hey, I got a little more time. I want to ride around with my friends. So I just encourage people to find that there isn't one way to do things. If getting a Lycra spandex thing and riding 30 miles is your thing, great. But if wearing your jeans and riding for 1 minute brings you joy, more power to you. That sounds more fun to me. Find your joy here in some outdoor time, whether that's walking or biking or rolling or whatever it looks like for you. And by the way, after it's safe to do so, we'll have to join up for a bike ride.
Oh, I would love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Kalamazoo, there you have it. My very good friend, a trusted voice for me, Matt Lechel. He's doing amazing work to keep our community safe, beautiful, accessible, and also think outside of the box of things we can do to even increase the quality of life for Kalamazoo. Not only is he a community activist and a trusted voice, he's doing phenomenal work at one of the greatest nonprofits here in Kalamazoo, One Place, located at the downtown Kalamazoo Library. Thank you for joining me, Matt. I have a favorite quote. Shirley Chisholm is one of my sheroes, and she would always say, if they don't create a space for you at the table, then bring your folding chair. And for years, a decade now, I've been bringing my folding chair. And then I thought, you know what? Why not create my own table? So here we are, Table Talk on MOOReTV, talking about important issues that I believe our overall community cares about. So thank you for being my very special guest, and I look forward to circling back around to you soon, having more conversations and educating to empower our community. Thank you.